Welcome to Newsmakers. I'm your host, Jeannie Hodes. Thanks for joining me. We are at the Truman Presidential Library in Independence, Missouri, talking about oversight when it comes to school construction projects in Kansas. And I'm with Kansas State Representative John Bradford. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
No problem. So you sponsored legislation that's now passed that creates a committee to try to review some of these school construction projects in Kansas. Tell me why you feel like that's necessary, and maybe if you could first also give us a little bit of information about just how school construction projects are funded for those who may not be familiar with it.
Well, first off, last year when we were seriously looking for ways to cut spending, we talked about the idea of controlling schools and reducing the number of bonds that were floated. I took a sincere interest in that, and from June of last year until we came in session this year, there were $300 million in new bonds floated by school districts and the accompanying interest on that. That interest, I'll give you an example. In 2004, we had $50 million in bonded interest. In 2019-2020, we will be up to $200 million. It was just out of control. So we said, the current system is, if my city wants to build a new high school, they take it to a vote of the people, and if it passes, that obligates the state up to a certain percentage that is determined by assessed value times the number of students. And that has been put in place since 1992. So when we walk in my city, we built a new school, and the state was obligated 50% of that payment, 49% actually. The legislators, in trying to balance a budget, we don't have a clue what's out there until we come back into session, and it's all of a sudden, boom, we floated this many, which was $300 million just this past year.
So will this committee look to see whether some of these projects truly are necessary
Yes.
or not?
And that committee, we were going to establish a separate committee just for that purpose that would be on call 3 times a year. But we decided to stay with the state building committee that controls all state building. And we decided to go with that. And the amount of money that would be allocated for new buildings would be controlled by that committee and with the Department of Education. It would be a set limit based on a 6-year rolling average, which would gradually be decreasing over time. And a school would come in, apply for this. If they were approved, they would be told how much they were approved for state offset. Then they would go back to the voters of the district and ask for a vote.
Do some of the concerns revolve around schools using some of these construction bonds for athletic construction as opposed to more academic? They
do, and what we stated in the original bill was the bond would not include athletic, such as football fields, track fields, basketball gyms. Mm-hmm. It would only be dedicated toward education of the students.
So they rely on boosters and other type of fundraising
yes.
for those sports?
And even if the state said no, that you can't justify getting a new school, they can still have the school, but they have to take it to the county. If the county wants to bond it out, have at it.
Is there any concern, do you guys have to be careful about how this all applies to the ongoing larger issue of school funding equity for the state? Is there any concern that it'll have an impact on that?
It will somewhat, but it's not going to be based in as we know it now, as a block grant. That will be separate.
Okay. That is all the time we have for today, but I really appreciate you being here. Hopefully you'll come back on again, because I know you got a lot of other issues you're working on as well.
Our meeting went so fast.
It did. Always does. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching. We'll see you next time on Newsmakers.